In Latin, we have a bunch of different aspects to verbs. First, we have number, person, tense, mood, and voice. We're going to focus on mood today. The mood that we have most focused on throughout the years is the indicative mood, which is the one that makes a statement. But today we're going to introduce the subjunctive verb. The subjunctive mood tends to indicate a wish or a fulfillment or something that has not actually happened. However, can also be used in a lot of clauses, and we're really going to focus on the clausal use of this verb first before we get into the independent use. There are 4 different tenses of the subjunctive, and the first one that we're going to look at is the present subjunctive. The present subjunctive is formed by a change in the connecting vowel. And there's a saying that'll help you remember this change. One of the sayings that I like to use is she wears a diamond. And all of the capitalized letters there represent the change that's going to take place within the conjugation. First conjugation verbs, the A is going to change to the connecting vowel E, and that E then will identify that we have a subjunctive verb. In second conjugation verbs, the E will change to EA. In third conjugation verbs, the I will change to A. And in fourth conjugation verbs, the I will change to IA. And this is the same change that takes place no matter what the verb is. As long as it's in that particular conjugation, that connecting vowel change will identify that it is a present subjunctive. Now again, we're going to be mainly focusing on them as if they were in clauses, which means our translation really isn't going to be any different than what we already know. But they can stand independently. So I do give you the independent translation down here also, just to help you out. Now, if we want to make the present subjunctive in the passive voice, the only thing we do is just make sure we use our passive endings, those aorist ter endings. So as you still note, the connecting vowel has changed. That's what's going to indicate the change to us. And then we just use the passive endings there. The next tense that we have for the subjunctive is the imperfect subjunctive. And the imperfect subjunctive is formed by taking the present infinitive of the verb and then adding the personal endings. But notice that we're using the M instead of O. So for example, down here, you have your infinitive amare plus the T. Now it's he might love. If I want to make it I would add an M. If I want to make it you, I would add an S. But the root of the word has to be the present infinitive. Then you place the personal ending on. Again, we're going to use these in clauses, so we'll translate them as if they were a regular indicative verb, but there are independent translations of it down here. To make it passive, we do the same thing as with the present. We're going to add the aorist ter ending instead of the MST ending. The third tense we have is the perfect subjunctive. And the perfect subjunctive I like to call the future perfect wannabe, because it looks very similar to the future perfect indicative. The main difference, though, is that the first person is erim instead of ero. To make the perfect subjunctive, we're going to take the third principal part, which is amal, and then add on one of these 6 endings. These are the only endings we can use for the perfect active subjunctive. Again, if you take a look down here, you'll see it's independent translation, but again, we're going to use it in a clause, so we want to make sure we're translating it just as if this was a regular perfect tense verb. To make it passive, here we're going to have a difference. Just like with the regular indicative perfect tense, we're going to use the fourth principal part, like amatus, and then we're going to add a form of to be. However, in the indicative, we added sum es est. Well, here we need to add what's the subjunctive of the verb to be. And the subjunctive form of that verb is sim, sis, sit. This one's easier because they actually all have the same root, and the endings correspond to that. So we're not going to use sum es est. Instead, we'll use the sim, sis, sit. And yes, it is 2 words here. 2 words, fourth principal part plus the subjunctive form of to be. The final tense that we have is the pluperfect subjunctive. And the pluperfect subjunctive is created by using the perfect active infinitive and then adding the endings. So here we're going to look for that isse added in. And then we'll add the MST. Again, the translation at the bottom here is the independent use. We're going to focus on it being used in a clause, though, so we'll translate it as if it was had, a regular pluperfect. To make it passive, we're going to follow the same pattern. We're going to use the fourth principal part plus the imperfect of to be. Now, when we were dealing with the indicative, we would add eram, eras, erat, which is the imperfect of to be. But we need to add the subjunctive imperfect to it. And this is where it gets a little tricky. But if you go back, you'll see that the imperfect subjunctive has to be the infinitive plus the ending. Well, look at it here. It's the infinitive plus the ending. So the imperfect of to be in the subjunctive form is sm, ss, esset. So we'll have two separate words here to indicate the pluperfect subjunctive in the passive. Now the future subjunctive in a tense itself does not exist. There is no future subjunctive or future perfect subjunctive. However, to express this future form in Latin, you can use the periphrastic, which we learned earlier with the you are and then the form of to be. So we will encounter this throughout the year, but just remember that there's no actual future subjunctive tense itself.